For some people, the offseason is long. The speculation is endless, and every team, well, most teams, are selling hope. But let's be real, not all of that is built to last. Some players will rise, some will fade, and some will shatter expectations in ways we don't see coming. Now we're standing on the edge of another season, ready to find out which names will define 2025. Randy Rosarina, he's had some moments, he's had some hype, but what's his ceiling? Is he a true game changer, the X Factor, or just a guy who shows up in October? Julio Rodriguez, he's already a star, but is this the year he forces his way into the MVP conversation and never looks back? And somewhere on the Mariners roster, there's a player on the verge of breaking out. Someone we'll all be talking about 6 months from now. The question is, who? And then there's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. We'll talk about the drama in Toronto. And then we'll circle back to the Mariners. You've heard the takes, you've seen the predictions, but I'm telling you right now, there's a reason to believe this team is built for success. Not just optimism, not just hope. Actual, real reasons. This episode isn't about what's obvious, it's about what's next. So settle in, get comfortable, let's dive in, because episode 74 of Keep It Electric starts right now. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto Blue Jays, they failed to reach a contract extension before his self-imposed deadline. And just like that, the countdown to his free agency is underway. It's getting very real. Now let's get into it. We're talking about one of the most talented hitters in baseball. Last season, he hit .323 with 30 bombs and 103 ribbies. He's got power, he's got presence, and he's been the face of the Blue Jays for years. But despite his love for Toronto, the two sides couldn't agree on what he's worth. Guerrero says he's not measuring himself against Juan Soto's monster 15-year, $765 million deal with the Mets. But let's be real. The contract is an elephant in the room. Vlad wants a deal that reflects his value, plain and simple. So where does this leave the Blue Jays? In a tough spot. They either pony up and pay the guy, or they risk losing him for nothing. And that's where the trade speculations start, because if Toronto knows they can't extend him, they do need to consider moving him before he walks. That's really the reality. So yeah, let's talk about the Mariners, because every time a superstar might be available, fans want to know, could Seattle make a move? Short answer, highly unlikely. Let's not kid ourselves. Guerrero is going to cost so much money. He's already making $28.5 million in arbitration this year. Any long-term deal is probably going to push well past 400. I'm hearing high 500s, maybe even 6 if he continues to mash. That's franchise-changing money, and we've seen how careful the Mariners front office is when it comes to spending big. The biggest bet they've spent on since the Dipoto era is Mitch Garver. But even if they were willing to back up the Brinks truck, there's another problem. Toronto is not trading Vlad to the Mariners unless they're absolutely forced to. The last thing they want to do is see him mash in Seattle. So unless the Mariners throw an offer at them that they can't refuse, think top prospects, very strong MLB-ready talent, 100% probably coming from the starting rotation. This is more of a pipe dream than a real possibility. Now, could Guerrero actually hit free agency? That's a different story. If Toronto drags this out and still can't get a deal done, then we're talking. But for now, Mariners fans can keep dreaming. Don't expect Jerry Dipoto to be calling up the Blue Jays anytime soon, trying to figure this deal out. Okay. So depending on how you look at it, the organization's model of consistency can either be a source of frustration or something to appreciate. It all really depends on which side of the coin you're looking at. If you're focused on the offense, you're probably shaking your head, wondering if there's ever going to be real aggression in player acquisitions. But if you turn to the pitching staff, it's a whole different story. The Mariners have been unwavering in their approach to developing arms. And let's be honest, more often than not, it's paying off. So now there's another name emerging in the system that should have our attention. Left-handed pitcher Brandon Garcia. According to Mariners GM Justin Hollander, Garcia is yet another example of the team's ability to develop talent from within. Now, I think there's a lot to like about Garcia. First of all, he's got the versatility factor, which is something the Mariners love in their pitchers. They drafted him out of Texas A&M in the 11th round in 2023. He was both a starter and a reliever in college. In his first year in the Mariners system, He put up a 2.25 ERA with 134 strikeouts, over 116 innings between high A and double A. Those are exactly the kind of numbers that can get a guy fast-tracked. And that seems to be what's happening. History tells us that if you're a pitcher and you succeed in double A for the Mariners, you don't usually spend time in triple A. In his first game in double A, he threw 5 no-hit innings, 2 walks, 8 Ks. He made a clear-cut statement that he's ready. And Hollander seems to agree. He's not shutting down the idea that Garcia could break camp with the big league team. Now, why should you be excited about him? Well, for one, he's a lefty. And let's be real, the bullpen is heavy on righties. So another left-handed option would be a massive plus. But he's also not just a situational lefty. He's not one of those guys that you throw in for 1 or 2 batters. He's got legit weapons that play against both righties and lefties. He's got a mid-90s sinker that absolutely runs in on left-handed hitters. He's got a sweeping mid-80s slider that gets a ton of ground balls. He's got a high-velocity fastball and apparently working on a second one that will blow past hitters. And then he's got a changeup that dies at the plate. Makes guys completely whiff on barrels. Now, Hollander tried not to throw around comparisons, but he did kind of allude to a Paul Sewald-esque ceiling. Now, he's not saying that Garcia is Sewald. I'm not saying that either, but I get why the Mariners see him as a guy who could have that kind of impact. Another thing I really like about him is the stamina. He's not purely a one-inning guy. He can go multiple innings if needed, which is something this team has lacked for the last several seasons. If you remember how often we saw starters go 5 innings, well, most of the time they're killing it, let's be honest. But at times it felt like these Mariners starters needed to go 6 just so the team could survive. Garcia could be that bridge. He could be the guy that gives some length, saving the rest of the bullpen while also shutting down the opposition. And let's not forget, Seattle actually tried this with Isaiah Campbell, if anyone remembers him, before they moved on from him. Campbell had the stuff, but struggled to recover between outings. So far, there's no concerns like that with Garcia. If he proves durable, he could be a game changer in that middle relief role. Now, if Garcia makes noise in spring training, he could force his way onto the opening day roster. And if that happens, we might just be looking at a major bullpen weapon for the Mariners in 2025. So it sounds like Brandon Garcia is someone that we need to be keeping our eyes on. Whoa, yeah! That's the pick-me-up I needed. First up, want even more content? Of course you do. Head over to keepitelectricpod.com for exclusive articles, extra deep dives, and some topics that I don't even get to on the show. If you're the kind of fan who loves stats, rumors, and unfiltered takes, that's the spot for you! If you want to get social, you can find me on Instagram at keepitelectric and on X, Twitter, for the OGs, at the Electric Pod. If you want to stay in the loop, drop some hot takes, roast my opinions, roast me for whatever your heart desires, that's where you can do it. If you've got a question, comment, or just want to vent about the Mariners, you can always reach out through the contact form on the website. Last but not least, if you're enjoying the pod, do me a huge favor. Leave a quick, positive review. It'll take you 5 seconds, costs you nothing, helps me a ton. More reviews mean more Mariners fans find the show, which means we can keep this thing rolling. All right, so we're going to spend just a couple moments talking about infield battles, because one thing we do know is that some spots aren't locked in. The front office might be saying one thing, but the numbers, they might be telling a different story. And this topic is really actually based off of Fangraph's 2025 projections. It's not exactly my opinion. Some of it is mixed in, but this is basically off of findings off of Fangraphs, which I thought was fascinating. So let's start with second base. Justin Hollander came out and said Dylan Moore will get the first crack at the job. What he didn't say is that it's his job to keep. We know this, because lurking behind him are Ryan Bliss, Leo Rivas, and top prospect Cole Young. The Mariners might be content giving Moore the opening day nod, but if that position isn't stabilized by midseason, you can bet Young will be making a serious push. Now, first base is a little different. The plan, at least according to the team, is a platoon between Luke Raley and Donovan Solano. That's pretty safe. Fangraph's 2025 projections, they're not really buying it. They've actually got Tyler Locklear cracking the big league roster and actually logging more at bats at first than Solano. So thinking about that for a second, because I thought Tyler Locklear disappeared after what the projections or what the Mariners projections look like this year. If those projections hold any weight, Seattle's infield could look a whole lot different as the season plays out. And it doesn't really stop at first base. It continues on into second base as well, because they've got Cole Young getting significantly more at-bats at second than Bliss, Solano, and Rivas combined. So even though Moore is projected to lead the group, those numbers make it clear Young isn't just a name for the future, he's a name for this season, so we need to pay attention to that. So what's the reality here? Are the Mariners just playing things close to the vest, or are they hoping to ease these young guys in while keeping expectations manageable? Or is it just a situation where the data is seeing a shakeup before the front office is willing to acknowledge it? Either way, here's what we know. Spring training might set the opening day depth chart, but it won't define the season. This infield battle is just getting started and is going to play out as the months roll on. Don't be shocked if the Mariners lineup looks a lot different than what's being penciled in right now. All right, so spring training is in full swing. Something to be super excited about. We're looking at an elite pitching staff, big expectations for Julio Rodriguez, who I'll talk about a little more later, and the ever-present hope that this is finally the year Seattle takes the next step. There's plenty of excitement for good reason. Now, as we gear up for what we hope is a special season, there's another player that I kind of want to put some lens on here. It's a name that hasn't been in the spotlight nearly as much as expected, especially this offseason. That's Randy Arozarena. Because let's be honest, if the Mariners are serious about making a deep run in October, they need him to be more than just another guy in the lineup. So when you think back to last summer, the trade deadline comes, Seattle makes a statement, they land Arozarena in a deal that felt like it could shift the trajectory of the season. Here's a guy with a track record of stepping up in big moments, someone who's built his name on postseason heroics, clutch performances, a player with the kind of edge that can turn a dangerous lineup into a relentless lineup. It felt like the perfect move. Arozarena playing meaningful September games and gearing up for another October run. Now, once he arrived, the reality didn't quite match the expectations. Instead of being that final piece that pushed the Mariners over the top, he struggled to find his rhythm. His presence in the lineup didn't have the immediate impact many had hoped for. And to make matters worse, he found himself being overshadowed by Victor Robles, a guy that we picked up off of waivers. That wasn't exactly how I think people expected things to go. It wasn't what the Mariners envisioned when they made the trade, and it certainly wasn't what Arozarena wanted either. Now, I say that to say let's not overreact and pretend like he suddenly forgot how to play baseball. This is still a guy with an all-star pedigree, someone who has delivered in the biggest moments and knows how to rise to the occasion. He's clearly got the talent, he's got the tool set, and the energy to be a difference maker in the lineup. Now, last season, the numbers kind of paint a concerning picture. He still managed to put up a 2020 season. He still managed to help the Mariners. And on paper, it looks solid, but when you dig into the details, there were some troubling trends. His approach to the plate shifted in a way that hurt him. His launch angle jumped. He got overly pull happy. And most alarming of all, he started struggling against fastballs, a pitch that he used to demolish. Now, that's just an off season, right? Or better yet, let's just call it an off year, right? Either way, that's a trend that needs correcting. And in a park like T-Mobile, where deep fly balls can turn into routine outs, those issues become even more pronounced. So now here we are in 2025, and Arozarena is kind of at a crossroads. The Mariners have made some key adjustments to their hitting philosophy, brought in a fresh coaching staff to get this offense trending in the right direction, and now the ball is kind of in Randy Arozarena's court. If he bounces back and finds his form, this lineup takes on a completely different level of danger. When he's at his best, he provides another dynamic weapon for the Mariners. Someone who can lengthen the lineup, provide power, and create havoc on the bases. But if the struggles continue, that's going to be a serious problem. The Mariners already have questions about offensive production from their infield. Left field cannot be another weak link. And we can't ignore the business side of things either. Arozarena has one more year left of arbitration after this season, meaning if things don't turn around, Seattle could look to flip him at the deadline. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. That's not that important. Right now, it's about what can he do this year, what kind of impact he can have on this team when it matters most. Because if he can get back to being the player the Mariners thought they were getting at the deadline, that changes everything. He doesn't need to carry this offense. No one's asking him to. He just needs to be the spark he's capable of being. And look, I'll be honest, there's reason to believe he can turn it around. I think the talent's there. The track record is there. The Mariners are putting him in a position to succeed, And he's got the opportunity to reestablish himself as one of the most exciting outfielders in the game. It's just a matter of whether he can make the necessary adjustments and get back to doing what he does best. I'm going to throw another name out there that I don't think we're talking about enough. Luke Raley. Luke Raley is my prime candidate for a breakout season, and here's why. From the moment Seattle traded for him, I had a good feeling about him. I remember watching him absolutely launch a ball at T-Mobile Park when he was still with the Rays. One of those no-doubt shots that make you think, yeah, this dude has legit power. And when the Mariners made the move to bring him in, I was really excited. It felt like a sneaky good pickup, one of those under-the-radar moves that could pay off big time. Honestly, he's already shown flashes that make me believe he's right on the cusp of something special. We've seen it before. Players who need the right opportunity to fully unlock their potential. Some guys are instant stars, and others, they need the right fit, the right environment, and most importantly, the right amount of playing time to put everything together. I think Luke Raley is one of those guys, and Seattle might be the perfect place for him to take that next step. First off, let's talk about the strides that he's already made. He finally got consistent playing time last season, 137 games split between the outfield and first base. That's a huge deal for one. Before that, he never had a full-time role. Considering he didn't make his MLB debut until 2021 at age 26, he's definitely what you would call a late bloomer. But late bloomers aren't a bad thing. Look at guys like Max Muncy. Look at guys like Justin Turner. Jose Bautista before he got punched in the face. But sometimes all it takes is the right situation and a little patience. So what did he do when he finally got a real shot? 2023 in Tampa, he gave us a glimpse of his power, 19 home runs, 49 ribbies, and an OPS plus of 124. Then in his first year in Seattle, he built on that. 22 home runs, 58 ribbies, 11 stolen bases, OPS plus of 129. That's legitimate production, especially for someone who didn't necessarily have an everyday role. He was bouncing between different positions, and the Mariners weren't exactly handing him the first base job on a silver platter. Yet he still found a way to produce at a high level. Now let's talk about something that I think is criminally underrated about his game. It's his athleticism. We've heard them talk about it, but when you look at him, you see a 6'3", 235-pound guy, and you assume he's a classic power hitter, big dude, lots of pop, probably not much else, but that's not who he is. He's way more athletic than people give him credit for. He's got surprising speed for his size. He swiped 11 bags last season, and he's more capable of tracking down balls in the outfield than most. Defensively, he made some really solid plays out there, and while I wasn't sold on him at first base early on, I do think he has the tools to become a steady presence there. The footwork probably needs some refining, but that's something he's likely been working on in this offseason. That's what they're for. So what's the final piece to the puzzle? For Luke Raley, I think it's stability. Look at his career. When he plays more, he produces more. It's that simple. Last year was the best season of his career. Why? Because it was the most he's ever played. If Seattle commits to him in a full-time role at first base, I genuinely believe he can take a massive leap forward. And let's talk about what that actually looks like. If the Mariners hand him the starting first base job out of the gate, I think we could see a 30-plus home run season from Luke Raley. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he flirts with the 2020 season. That's 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. I am calling that out. That kind of production from a first baseman, that's a game changer. Is he Paul Goldschmidt? No. He's not quite that level of pure hitter, but in terms of raw power, athleticism, and potential impact, he can be a nightmare for opposing pitchers. He's the type of guy who, if he's locked in, can carry an offense for stretches of a season. And that's why I'm saying don't sleep on Luke Raley. If this guy gets an everyday role and stays healthy, we're going to be looking back at 2025 saying like, wow, this guy really took off. Speaking of taking off, let's switch gears really quick and talk about Julio Rodriguez and his chances of making a real push toward MVP contention in 2025. Let's be honest, I don't really even think that this is a debate. Some people might frame last season as a down year for him, but was it really? Or was it just a down year for the entire Mariners offense? Because when you step back and really look at the numbers, Julio was still the same dynamic player we've come to expect. If anything, his production was right in line with what he's done every year. Now let's take a look. His spray chart, no drastic changes, still driving the ball to all fields like he always does. Hard hit percentage, rock solid, staying between 48 and 52% every year. Strikeout rate, almost identical, 24.5 in 2024 compared to 25.9 in 2022 and 24.5 in 2023. Walk rate, also steady. I think the dip in its barrel percentage, that slid from 11.9 to 10.2. Not a dramatic drop, but I do think that drop is notable. So when people talk about Julio needing a bounce back year, I don't even see it that way. He doesn't need to reinvent himself or unlock some hidden part of his game. There's no glaring weaknesses that need fixing. The talent, the tools, the work ethic, it's all there. The real question isn't about Julio, it's about the guys around him. Think about it. If the Mariners lineup had been competent last season, Julio's numbers would have looked a lot better. That's the missing piece. If the supporting cast does its job, if Arozarena plays up to his potential, if Victor Robles contributes at a respectable rate, a very similar rate to last season, Julio is going to see better pitches to hit. And when Julio Rodriguez is consistently getting pitches to drive, that's when things get dangerous. No, sure, consistency will always be a factor. You'd love to see him avoid those extended cold stretches, but let's not overthink this. Julio is going to be Julio, and that's a great thing for the Mariners. Just like Kyle Raleigh, you can live with the strikeouts because his impact behind the plate outweighs them. The same logic kind of applies to Julio. His defense alone makes him a cornerstone piece, and his offensive upside is still sky high. So when I look ahead to 2025, I see an MVP caliber player, one who's already proven he can be elite. The only thing standing between Julio and that next level is the team around him. If the Mariners get it right and give him the support he needs, we're looking at a guy who's going to be right there in the MVP race. Mark it down. Now, for the last couple of episodes, I know that I've been towing the line on expectations. I don't want to show giddy optimism because there's a very real chance that this team underperforms again like it did last season. But what I do believe is that the Mariners will have a successful year this season. Now, why do I think the Mariners will have a successful year? It's pretty simple. I just don't see this team putting out the same product we saw last season. The offense was inconsistent, key players underperformed, and there were stretches where it felt like this team just couldn't get out of its own way. But to expect a repeat of that, I just don't think there's any chance of that. Now, does that mean every single player who's due for a bounce back year will actually have one? No. Baseball doesn't work like that. Injuries will happen, slumps will happen. No team makes it through 162 games unscathed. And let's be honest, we've been extremely fortunate that our pitching staff has remained as intact as it has over the last couple of seasons. But even with all that in mind, this is still a playoff caliber team. This is a group that was right there last season, despite their struggles. And if they can just get better production from a few key guys, Randy Arozarena, Jorge Polanco, J.P. Crawford, and even Mitch Garver, who I definitely threw some shade at, Mitch Garver in a backup DH role, they'll be a completely different team. If those guys stay healthy and produce even at a league average level, the Mariners will absolutely be in the mix. Last year, this team was capable of looking like a contender on one night and an afterthought the next. They take 2 of 3 games from a great team, then go out and get embarrassed by the Tigers. That inconsistency killed them. But talent-wise, they have what it takes to compete with the Astros, and I do think they can beat Houston this year. The Rangers, I think that's another conversation. They're still the team to beat when healthy, but the Mariners are in a much better spot than people are giving them credit for. The key to the Mariners' success this year won't just be the division race. It's going to be the competition inside of the club room. And I get it. Fans are frustrated. I'm frustrated. The front office didn't go out and spend big. We all agree this team is a couple bats away from being a legitimate World Series contender. But let's not act like this organization just rolls over when things don't go according to plan. They haven't done that since the Kendall Graveman trade. If the Mariners stumble out of the gate, or if they're hovering around 500 at the All-Star break, I can guarantee this front office will make moves. They'll put themselves in a better position to compete down the stretch. And honestly, that might just be the best case scenario. Because if this team comes out firing early, if they build a lead in the division, there's a risk that the front office convinces itself that their build on a budget approach is sustainable. And let's be real, that's not how you win a World Series. The Mariners will need to be aggressive when the moment calls for it. And if they aren't, the competition inside the division will for sure force their hand. Now, why do I think this team will improve? Let's not overlook this. The Mariners have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. They're still improving. Every single pitcher in this rotation is pushing themselves to be better. The internal competition, guys pushing each other, learning from each other, finding ways to dominate hitters, all of that stuff matters. Most teams don't have this level of pitching depth. Most teams wish they had this kind of rotation, and if the Mariners do find themselves needing an upgrade at the deadline, they have plenty of pitching depth to make a deal, but let's not think too far about that right now. I've been on the record saying I don't love Mitch Garver's fit on this roster, but if he can stay healthy and provide any sort of consistent production, his presence actually does help this team. Because here's the thing, Kyle Raleigh, he's a workhorse. He'll be behind the plate every time we ask for him to be behind the plate. But we saw last year what happens when he's overworked. If Garver can handle catching duties on a semi-regular basis, that allows Raleigh to stay fresh, spend more time in the DH role, and be a more effective player throughout the season. Garver himself knows he needs to have a better year. He talked about it in interviews. He's hungry. And when a guy is motivated, when he knows he has something to prove, that's when you can get a surprising season out of him. Another reason is that J.P. Crawford and Victor Robles are kind of playing for their futures. J.P. Crawford isn't deaf. He hears the noise. He knows fans and analysts are questioning whether he can still go. And if we've learned anything about Crawford, it's that he plays better with a chip on his shoulder, and he works hard in the offseason. He's going to come back strong. The same thing goes for Victor Robles. He was hot last year, sure, but he's still proving that he can be an everyday big leaguer. He's still fighting to keep that spot, continue his career resurgence, and competition like that elevates players. If both these guys play up to their potential, if both of these guys play like the leadoff hitters we've known them to be, and that they've shown us that they can be, the Mariners are going to be instantly better. A healthy Jorge Polanco changes this offense. Jorge Polanco was banged up all last year, but he still managed to put up nearly 20 home runs. If he's fully healthy, he's a difference maker in this lineup. He lengthens the batting order, he provides another source of power, and he's a switch hitter who can drive and run. So a motivated, healthy Polanco with a chip on his shoulder as well could be a massive X factor for this team. Now look, I'm not saying that this team is perfect. I won't sit here and pretend that there aren't holes, but guess who else has holes? Every other MLB team, except maybe the Dodgers. Most teams have weaknesses. What the Mariners do have is enough talent to compete. They have enough firepower to stay in the mix. And when we get down to the final stretch of the season, I fully expect Seattle to be playing meaningful baseball. Now, will it be a tight race? Absolutely. Just like last year. But I believe in the bounce back potential of key players. I believe in the strength of this rotation. And whether it's with the roster as currently constructed or after a midseason trade, I firmly believe the Mariners will be playing October baseball in 2025. That's going to wrap up this episode with Keep It Electric. Big thanks to everyone for tuning in and rocking with us. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to follow, rate, and share it with other fans. We'll be back next time with more Mariners talk. See you soon.